When practicing with a metronome, I always find it very important to start the metronome tempo slower than I think I can play it. Then as I go along, if I encounter mistakes, set it back to the tempo previous that you could play it perfectly at. Remember, play only as fast as perfect. Another rule for me with the metronome is to make sure that I play softly so that I can hear the metronome. Several times I have sat there practicing with the metronome on my stand, blinking away, and unable to hear it because I was playing too loudly.
A metronome can be a very valuable tool because it lets you measure your progress from day to day.
When working with a metronome, keep in mind that there's no such thing as too slow. If you get to a point where you're no longer playing it perfectly, slow it down again.
When you start working with the metronome, what is absolutely most important is honesty. And you start playing, and if it doesn't sound perfect, then you're too fast. And that is hard on our egos, and we have to just admit that it doesn't sound good. So slow it down, and if it still doesn't sound good, slow it down even more until finally it sounds great. And now you've established your bass tempo and can get some serious work done.
The long-term goal of working with a metronome and really overlearning your music is so that you can get to the point where you're not thinking about what valve you have to press down next. You're thinking about what beautiful phrase you're about to turn and what beautiful music you're able to play and how much fun you're having playing it.
You first need to learn the music, and then you need to overlearn the music. So you start out with the metronome, and you have to be honest. If the music is anything less than perfect, you need to go slower until you find your bass tempo. And once your bass tempo is there, then you need to test yourself to see if it was an accident or if it's repeatable. And a good rule of thumb is 3 times in a row without any mistakes. When you can do this, then you move the metronome up 1 notch. If you have a digital metronome, then move it up 3 or 4 beats a minute. And again, you have to stay with this tempo until you can do it 3 times in a row, and every single aspect of the music is perfect.
In order to use your metronome to overlearn your music, you basically just start slowly, play the passage 3 times perfectly at that tempo, and then you can kick it up a notch and repeat the process. Once you finally get it to your performance tempo, you know that you've really got it nailed and got it learned when you can turn the metronome back down to any of those tempos that you played on your way up and play it perfectly there too.
When using a metronome to overlearn the music, I find that if I am able to work up to tempo on the first day, the second day when I go back to practice the same piece, I should always start slower than the tempo. The next day, a little faster, but still slower than the tempo I want to get to. By the end of the week, I should be able to start it at whatever the performing tempo is, having spent time going back every day slower than needed.
And you can repeat this process until you finally achieve performance tempo. In fact, you might even go slightly past that just to have a little edge. At this point, you have now learned the music, but it's not overlearned. Overlearning means doing this process again so that when you're under stress, whether it be in front of an audience or in front of a judge, that'll still be with you. And a spin-off benefit is that many months later, you'll still be able to play the piece. So it's more of a lifelong learning process. So how do you overlearn? You go back to your bass tempo, and it will seem so slow. But now you can be even more picky and say, are all my tacks exactly right? Are all my slurs really good? Do I play every note exactly where it belongs? And you should sound like the finest player in the world on that passage. And again, 3 times in a row. But instead of moving the metronome up 1 notch, you go 2 notches. And then again, 3 times in a row. And then you repeat this process to full speed. Back to bass tempo, and then do 3 notches, and repeat this whole process several times again. So you're skipping 4 and 5 notches in between. At that point, you'll have the music overlearned, and it will be there no matter how much stress you're under.
Make sure you remember to take some time to rest your chops during your practice sessions. I'm a firm believer in quality practice time and not necessarily quantity practice time. And if you allow your chops to rest, then you're not beating yourself up and you're just getting a lot more done.
There is a point of decline in brass players that things start to go wrong, and as you push past this point, you start getting really good at doing things wrong, and we don't want to go there. There's also a mental point of decline that the brain loses focus and concentration, and there's no point playing. So it's best at that point to just stop and take a short break and then come back.
When practicing a piece of music, especially as a brass player, endurance is always going to be a factor. The general rule of thumb is to rest as much as you play. This will give your lips and your muscles time to recover, and also help you to always sound your best as you practice.
If the lips are tired and you still are hungry to practice, then this is a good time to again go back and study the music, look at your pencil marks, and re-identify all the things that we talked about, the tempo, the dynamics, and so forth, and make sure that you really understand what the composer wants you to do. Resting is a very necessary and important part of your practice.